there. Welcome back to the Cory Doctorow podcast. Gosh, it has been a long time. First, I got stuck in LA by a volcano. And then the next week I was in Boston at the Massachusetts Library Association down in Cape Cod, and then at an event in Boston in the weekend. And then almost immediately I turned around and left and flew to America for a month-long For the Win tour. And I am finally back at my desk for a little while at least, and able to start podcasting to you again. And I really missed it. So thank you to everyone who wrote to ask when I'd start again. I'm starting again, and I'm really glad to be talking to you again as well. So like I said, I've just gotten back from my book tour. I was in more cities than I could count. I had 8 consecutive delayed flights in 2 weeks, and it ended in Toronto on Friday, and Saturday night we flew home to London. I am still jet lagged, as you might imagine. This is, of course, compounded by the fact that my daughter, Posey, the 2.5-year-old, got very rambunctious on the plane, hardly slept. We got about 2.5 hours. And then last night, her first night in a big girl bed, I might add. We're all very proud of her. She got up every hour for about 20 minutes until about 2 in the morning. And then we got up at 5. So if I sound a little out of it, it's because I'm a little out of it. But it was an amazing tour. You know, writers complain about tours all the time, and they are hard, right? I mean, the hard part is like not getting enough sleep, trying to keep up with your work while you're traveling. But the hard part is not, in my experience, going to a bunch of nice places, staying in a decent hotel, and then spending all day meeting with people who just want to tell you how much they like your work. That part's not hard. In fact, that part was awesome. And thank you for everybody who came out to all the tour stops. For the Win is doing really well. It's already up for some awards, and my publisher's really happy with the sales. The paperback of Little Brother came out around the same time, and it's just hit the New York Times bestseller list. So I'm a New York Times bestseller twice over now, which I'm very happy about. Many of you are waiting for news about With a Little Help. Those of you who don't follow the column in Publishers Weekly won't know that it's been delayed until September. That's because I went on tour, and so I couldn't do the proofs, and I couldn't do the hardcover prototyping. I could theoretically get it out for July the 1st, but I'm going away for all of August for various family things, and I wouldn't be able to fulfill orders of the hardcover while I was away. So I thought I would launch it in September when I'm going to be home more or less the whole time. Well, actually, tell a lie. I'll be in Germany for 10 days. But apart from that, I'm going to be home the whole time. And that'll make it a good Christmas season buy as well. So it's I've seen the galleys, and it looks really good. The hardcover prototype I haven't seen yet, but I'm very, very excited about it. I've been working really hard on Pirate Cinema. That's the next young adult novel. It's due next Christmas, and I'm really on track to deliver it then. This is my novel about kids who fall afoul of the new British law that takes away your family's internet access if you're accused of piracy over the internet. These kids end up costing their families everything. And in a kind of neo-Dickensian story, they end up living on the streets and fighting to preserve British democracy from the entertainment industry. It's been really fun to write. It's full of lots of little Dickens in-jokes, and that's been really fun to do too. As I say, it'll be done in December, and they're still trying to work out scheduling. They may try to rush it out for the end of spring, for the end of the school year, which would be probably May 2011. I think it's more likely it's going to be September 2011. Charlie Strauss and I have signed up to do a book together. We're going to write a third novella in our Hugh short stories. We wrote 2. The first one was called Jury Service. The second one was called Appeals Court. We're going to write a third one called Parole Board, and they're going to be published between one set of covers by Tor Books, sometime probably in 2011, or maybe early 2012, I suppose, under the title Rapture of the Nerds. We are due to turn that in June, so that's a year from now. I've also signed up to do 2 new nonfiction books since I last spoke to you. One will be one of the little lovely chapbooks from PM Press. It consists of a short story, an essay, and an interview. And they're little 80-pagers. There's a really good one with Kim Stanley Robinson I reviewed a little while ago. and I'm looking forward to doing that. That will be sometime in 2011 or 2012. And I'm going to do a sequel to Content, my essay collection, another collection of reprinted essays. Don't know yet what we're going to call it, but I'm thinking of calling it Container. So Content and Container seem like a good complementary set of titles. My agent and I are going back and forth about yet another nonfiction book. No title as yet, but it'll be based around explaining 3 ideas that I express in grandiose form as Doctorow's 3 laws. The first one is, anytime someone puts a lock on something that belongs to you and won't give you the key, that lock is not for your benefit. The second one is, it's hard to monetize obscurity. It's impossible to monetize fame. You'll recognize that as a variation on Tim O'Reilly's aphorism. And then the third one is, information doesn't want to be free. People do. And that's the kind of big picture one. It'll be a short, businessy book, probably around 120, 150 pages, aimed at people in the creative industries who are looking to figure out what to do in the face of the changes that the internet is bringing on. And it's going to have lots of little anecdotes and be a little kind of Gladwell-y. I'm very looking forward to writing it. I'm going to give him the pitch in late September. And we'll see who we can sell it to, and I'll give you more information as we get that. Also, if I ever come up with a title I like, I'll send that along to you too. I'm going to be in Washington, D.C. next. That's my next stop. I'm going to be there at the end of June, and I'm going to be speaking at the American Library Association at the local Copy Night event. And then I'm going to be doing an event in Baltimore, co-hosted by Red Emma's, which is the anarchist bookstore, and Baltimore Node, which is the hackerspace. And I hope I'll see some of you there. Since the last time we talked, I've had a new short story come out. It's actually a kind of warm-up for the pirate cinema story. It's called The Jammie Dodgers and the Adventure of the Leicester Square Premiere. And it was published in shareable.net, which is a new and very good website to promote shareable culture. So with their kind permission, I'm going to read this to you in 2 parts. And the first part I will read now. There is a phone. There is a phone. There is a phone like no phone that was ever hatched by the feverish imaginations of the world's phone manufacturers. A phone so small and so featureful and so perfect for my needs that it couldn't possibly have lasted. And it didn't. And so now I hunt the phone, and now I have found the phone. I saw it sitting in the window of the cash converters in the Kentish Town High Street. This little pawn shop was once a tube station, believe it or not, used as a bomb shelter during the Blitz, and you can still find photos of the brave sons and daughters of England sleeping in ranks on the platform, rolled up in blankets like subterranean grubs waiting to hatch, sheltering from Hitler's bombers as they screamed overhead. Now the top of the station is a pawnbroker's, and around the back there's a massage parlor that offers discreet services for the discerning gentleman. I am no gentleman, but I am discerning. And what I am discerning right now is an HTC Screen Party Mark I phone, circa 2014, running some ancient and crumbly version of Google's Android operating system. And there, right there, on the back panel is a pair of fisheye lenses. One is the camera, the other is the projector. That's the business, that projector. The Screen Party one was the first ever phone ever delivered with a little high-powered projector built into it, and the only Android phone that had one, because 10 minutes after it shipped, Apple dusted off some old patent on putting projectors in handheld devices and used the patent to beat the Screen Party one to death. And yes, there were projectors in the iPhones that followed, but you couldn't do what I planned on doing with an iPhone, not with all the spyware and copyright rubbish that Apple's evil wizards have crammed into their pocket-sized jailers. I had to have that Screen Party. So I squared up my shoulders and pulled my scarf tighter around my neck and thought, you are a respectable fellow. You are a respectable fellow. You did not eat garbage this morning. You did not sleep in an abandoned building. You did not grow up in a housing estate. You are a bloody toff. A deep breath, fog in the cold air, and I was through the door, winking back at the CCTV that peered down on me from the ceiling, then smiling my best smile at the lad behind the counter, who looks like any kid from my estate, skinny and jug-eared with too many spots that are the color that spots go when you pick at them. "Hello there, my son," I said, putting on the voice that a toff would use if he wanted to sound like he was being matey and not at all superior. The lad grinned. "You like the phone, mister? Saw you looking at it. Just got it in that one." "It's a funny little thing. I remember when they first came out. Never worked very well, but they were good fun when they did. The lad reached into the window. The shop was that small he didn't even have to get off his chair, and plucked out the phone. I saw that it was absolutely cherry, mint condition, the plastic film still covering the screen, which meant that the battery was almost certainly in good nick, too. That was good. No one made batteries for the screen party anymore. He handed it over to me and fished behind the counter for a mains cable, then passed that over too. I plugged one into the other and hit the power button. The phone chimed, began to play its animation, and then the projector lit up, splashing its startup routine on the ceiling's grimy acoustic tiles, a montage of happy people all over the world watching movies that were being projected from their happy little phones and played against nearby walls. I waited for it to finish booting up its ancient operating system with something like nostalgia, seeing old icons in Chrome I hadn't seen since I was a boy. Then I turned around and finally said, "You won't be wanting much for this, I suppose. A $5?" It was worth more than £5, but I was betting that the lad didn't know what it was worth, and by starting the bid very low, I reckoned I could keep the final price from going too high. Well, it couldn't go too high, since all I had in my pocket was £10 plus some change. The lad shook his head and made to put the phone away. "You're having a laugh. Something like that worth a lot more than £5. I shrugged. "If that's how you feel." I sprinkled a little wave at him and turned for the door. "Wait," he said. "What about 20? I snorted. "Son," I said, "that phone was obsolete 4 years ago. It's a miracle that it even works. If it breaks, no one will be able to mend it. Can't even buy a battery for it. £5 is a good price for a little fun, a gizmo you can amuse the boys with at the pub." He took the phone out of the window. "I got all the packaging and whatnot, too. Came in from a storage locker that went into arrears. The company sold off the contents for the back rent. Will you go 10? I shook my head. 5 is my final offer. I had noticed something when I came into the shop, a little ace in the hole, and so now I fished it out. 5, and a bit of information. The boy rolled his eyes. I upped my mental estimate of him a little. Pawnbrokers must get every chancer and twit in the world coming over their threshold with some baroque hustle or other. "I'll give you the information, and you can decide if you think it's worth it. How about that?" The boy narrowed his eyes, nodded a fraction of the inch. "That game back there, that old DSI cartridge in its box, just there?" I pointed, then quickly put my hand down. I forgot about the new cuts there, a little run-in with some barbed wire, not the sort of thing a toff would have. The boy reached down and pulled it out. "Star Wars Cantina Dance-Off," he said, setting it down on the glass. The box was a little scuffed, but it was still presentable. "Google it," I said. He snorted and turned around to get his phone. In one smooth motion, I dropped the screen party in my pocket with one hand and opened the door with the other. One step backwards took me over the threshold, and I pivoted on my back foot so I was facing forward and did a runner, lighting off up the Kentish Town High Street toward the back streets, down the canal embankment, and off along the towpath. As I ran, I thumbed my panic button in my coat pocket, and the infrared LEDs sewn into my jacket all went to max intensity, blinding every CCTV I passed. Yes, I stole the bloody phone. But that lad got the best of the deal, have no fear. Cantina Dance-Off had a secret mode that let you make Jabba get up to all kinds of disgusting, sexy things with slave girl Leia, not to mention what you could get Chewbacca to do to R2-D2. It was pulled off the shelves in 48 hours, and is the rarest video game ever sold. As of today, copies are changing hands for upwards of 15,000 quid. So yeah, I stole the phone. But I could have bought Dance-Off for £3 and flogged it for 15 grand. The lad got the best of the deal. I'm an honest thief. Cecil was at his edit suite when I came back to the squat, a pub in Bow that some previous owner had driven into bankruptcy and ruin, but not before covering its ancient brickwork in horrible pebble dashing, covering its crazed, hand-painted signs up with big, laser-printed vinyl banners swirling with JPEG artifacts, and covering up the worn wooden floors with cheap linoleum. The bank, or whoever owned the derelict building, had never got round to turning off the electricity which powered the boiler that kept the damp from eating the building alive. Cecil sat cross-legged on a banquette, scowling at his screens, hands flying over his mouse and trackball, scrubbing the video on his screens back and forth. He didn't look up when I came down the stairs, having chinned myself to the upper floor by the molding around the back of the pub, through the window with the loose board. But he did look up when I sat the phone down in front of him, with a precise click as it touched the table before his keyboard. He looked at me, at the phone, rubbed his eyes, looked back at me. "Oh, Fingo, you shouldn't have," he he said, and smiled like a million watts at me, scratching at his stubbly chin and neck with his chewed-down fingernails. He picked up the phone in his nimble hands and turned it over and over. "Been ages since we had one of these. What'd you pay for it?" I smiled. £15,000. He nodded. "They're getting more expensive." There's about 8 of us in the Jammie Dodgers, which is what Cecil calls his gang. About 8, because some come and go as their relationships with their families wax and wane. Cecil's 17, but he isn't the oldest of us. Sal is 20, and I once heard Amir admit to 22, but Cecil's got all the ideas. Cecil and I grew up on the same estate, in a part of East London where rows of Victorian paupers' cottages had been taken over by rich children who had turned the local pubs into hotspots where you couldn't find anyone over 25, where the fashion designers came to spy on the club kids for next year's streetwear line. Pubs where you could get a pint for a couple pounds turned into places that sold real ale for a fiver and eye-wateringly expensive scotch over perfectly formed ice spheres. We weren't mates back then, not until both our families got dragged into the mandatory safe network use counseling sessions. He'd been downloading his obscure Keith Kennison's videos for his great work, whereas I'd just been looking to fill my phone up with music. We were both kids, dumb enough to do our wicked deeds without a proxy, and so we got the infamous red disconnection notice through the door, and both our families were added to the blacklist of households that could not be legally connected to the net for a full year. We all got dragged down to the day-long seminars where a patronizing woman from the BPI explained how our flagrant piracy would destroy the very fabric of British society. Between the videos where the posh movie stars and rockers explained how bad we were, and the videos where the blokes that held the cameras and built the sets explained how hard they work, Cecil and I began to pass files back and forth. He touched his phone to mine, and I tapped the allow button and got a titanic wad of video in return. I picked out a few dozen of my favorite songs to pass back, then snuck off to the bathroom to watch, screwing in a headphone and turning the volume down. It was about 10 minutes worth of video, and it was of Keith Kennison, of course. I knew him because he'd just played a hard-fighting cop who fought the mob in a flooded coastal California town, but this was from much earlier. It had scenes of Kennison as a 10-year-old, talking with his dad, a character actor I recognized but couldn't place, then as a teenager, mouthing off to his teachers, then back to his dad. Pretty sure that the character actor was in another role, but it was a very tight edit, then forward to the latest Kennison cop role, and it became clear that this was all a flashback during a tense moment while Kennison was hiding out from gangsters under a pier, his breath rasping in the wet dark. "What the hell was that?" I whispered to him as I got back to my seat. He grinned and rubbed his hand. "The great work," he said, pronouncing the capital letters. "You know Keith Kennison, yeah? Well, I'm making a movie that tells the story of all the lives he's ever played as though it were one long life. From the kid he played on Two Sugars, Please, to the Navy Frogman and Drums of War, to the President of the United States and Mr. President, Please, to the Super Cop and Indefatigable, all cut together to make one incredible biopic." He mimed a cackle and rubbed his hands together, earning us dirty looks from the BPI lady who'd been lecturing us about how poor Sir Keith Richards couldn't afford to keep up his fleet of Bentleys and rollers if we didn't stop with our evil downloading. He ignored it. "The music you sent me looks pretty cool, too." I felt inadequate, but I also felt like he was a certified nutter. At the tea break, he grabbed me by the arm and hustled me outside of the leisure center. We hid under the climbing frame in the playground, and he sparked up a gigantic spliff. "It's just something we grow in an abandoned building site. Hardly gets you off," he croaked, and passed it over. Then, as the munchies overtook us, he produced an entire packet of Jammie Dodgers, shortbread cookies with raspberry jam in the middle, from under his shirt, lifted from the snacks table. "Jammie Dodgers, it's so bloody Dickensian," he said, giggling around a mouthful of cookie crumbs and fragrant smoke. I laughed too. "We should start a gang," I said. And 3 months later, when my mom lost her job benefits because she couldn't go online to renew them and couldn't get down to the job center to queue up for them, not with her legs, when his dad lost his job because he wasn't able to put in the extra hours on email that everyone else was doing, that's exactly what we did. We'd caused our families enough trouble. It was time to hit the road. Well, that's this week's reading. Got plenty of work to do. Hope to talk to you next week. Bye. You've been listening to the Cory Doctorow podcast, licensed under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share-alike US 3.0, or as Woody Guthrie put it in another context, This song is copyrighted in the U.S. under seal of copyright 154085 for a period of 28 years, and anyone caught singing it without our permission will be a mighty good friend of ourn, because we don't give a darn. Publish it, write it, sing it, swing to it, yodel it, we wrote it, that's all we wanted to do. Many thanks to John Taylor Williams for mastering. That's Ryneck Studio, WRYNECK Studio @gmail.com. John Taylor Williams is a full-time self-employed audio engineer, producer, composer, and sound designer. In his free time, he makes beer, jewelry, odd musical instruments, and furniture. He likes to meditate, to read, and to cook. Talk to you next week.